now we're having a short panel with international professionals that have certain experience and knowledge about the Slovenian market. So I'm welcoming. First, I have to welcome the new bonus panelists that I proposed for this panel. Reinhold Seidfriedensberger from Ink Music Vienna. Then Nick Hobbs from Istanbul-based Charmenko promotion and booking agency. We have Dragan Ambrožič from the Omladine from Belgrade, and we have Team Ertl from Graz Springfestival. All of you have your own experience with working in Slovenian markets. I will start with each of you separately with discussing the field that you are working in. So I would start with Reinhold, as we have ended last night together, closing up Flug Vienna, so we should start also today, I guess, in more constructive terms. So basically, I asked you to join this panel because I think it's pretty important. Your experience and experience of your company, Ink Music in Vienna, which, as I know, has also booked quite many of acts playing in this festival, the Waves, and we've been working now. So my two years, and for me it's really important the scale of artists that we book through you. So it's kind of like small, growing in the art. So please tell me, how do you see? What's the importance? What are the pluses of working with a small and specific market as Slovenia?
Firstly, I think it's quite obvious and logic to extend the booking territories we work on as an agency. We don't want to stick only in Austria, and as we work with a lot of international artists as well, I think Slovenia is just around the corner, and it's a good market. We have nice venues there, especially Kino Šiška. It's like the main venue where we do shows. It's from Vienna, it's a 4 hours drive to Ljubljana. From Graz it's 2 hours, so it can easily be attached to the routine. And it's important for the international artists we have that we can offer them new and other markets as well. And that's why I like to work in Slovenia. And so far everything worked nicely with Kino Šiška. So you're doing it good there.
Thanks. But would you say that then we are a small market, but would you say that the strategic position adds to the bonuses, the plus of our market? Just like, as I said, we're small but based among different markets: Italian, Austrian, Croatian, Hungarian. It adds to the possibility to build a tour in the region to have.
It's another option, and that's very good, and it totally meets international standards. So I don't see any point why not doing shows in Slovenia then.
Okay, Nick, your experience is booking more or less major artists to not only to Slovenian market, but to a great deal of Eastern European markets. You have experience with working with various Slovenian promoters, organizers. You have experience with working with other ex-Yugoslavian promoters. You have experience throughout the whole Europe. So how would you say what are the pluses and minuses for, especially I'm interested in bigger, major acts, which are pretty hard to get in Slovenia, as we know also from experience with working with you. How this strategic position and pluses, can it be a bonus also on this larger scale
And you missed off my most important connection with Slovenia, which is that I was Leibach's manager for 5 years. So, what do I think? Well, I mean, of course, all the obvious things about geography, there's nothing much to say about them, that's what they are. And there's, from a touring point of view of major bands, whatever a major band might be, I mean, I think the last major show we did in Ljubljana was Slash. This year, what was it? I can't remember. No, yeah, last year. Well, anyway, whenever it was. And touring bands, the economy's dictated by how many shows you can do next to each other on a run. So that if you can do Budapest, Belgrade, Zagreb, Ljubljana, Vienna as a run, maybe with a day off, just because the singer needs a day off, then that makes it economically viable to include a relatively small city, Ljubljana, which is probably unable to pay the highest fee on the tour by any means, probably paying one of the lowest fees on the tour. But it's okay, as long as it routes, it's okay. The problems you have with bigger shows is, the first problem is that Zagreb and Ljubljana are only 130 kilometers apart, so very often the Zagreb promoter will want an exclusivity for Ljubljana and vice versa. So it's not so often you can do both. But that's not too bad, because you still got Belgrade and Budapest. And Austria. Italy is less helpful because there's not really many Italian cities on the touring circuit before you get to Bologna and Milan. So Udine is sort of, and Mestre are not too common. They did a club level, but not for bigger tours.
That's lucky for us, because then we get the Italian so close to the Italian audience.
There's, it's not only Kino Šiška is a great venue, but also Križanka is a great venue, which is it's a semi-roofed space in the middle of Ljubljana. So it's a summer stage, but it's a particularly nice summer stage. It's very central and has lots of good things about it. We don't seem to do as many shows there as we used to, and maybe you could answer why that is. I mean, once upon a time we did things there quite regularly, but it doesn't seem to happen anymore.
Well, it's all connected with just a bit of downhill of the concerts market in Slovenia in the last few years. I guess it was, last year we promoted kind of a small festival there with the Things, Crystal Castles and Willy Moon. It's pretty hard to cover the expenses, and the expenses of Križanka itself, they're rising. The promoters in Slovenia just lost too many times too much money in the last year, so they're not very brave lately.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some fairly serious problems with promoters. Well, we've had one very serious problem with a Slovenian promoter who just ran away from a festival and didn't pay anybody, a complete bastard.
Was he at least at the festival?
No, the festival got cancelled.
Okay.
Yeah, because a week before the festival, no money had been paid, and it was sort of stupid things. But it's years ago, but it was not very pleasant for me. Thomas, is it Pukat?
Okay.
What's his name?
Pukat.
Yeah, Pukat. So if you ever come across a guy called Pukat, stay away from him. And there's a few other famous Slovenian promoters that I would not do business with, some of the old ones.
But that's everywhere.
That's everywhere. There's a little bit more of a higher percentage of them in Slovenia, considering the size of the country. Yeah. Not Vidmar. Vidmar's okay, although,
So small but unreliable.
Well, you have to be careful, let's say. It's a small country, but it's easy to run away. I think what happens also is that Croatian promoters run away to Slovenia when they want to avoid their debts, and Slovenian promoters run to Croatia when they want to avoid their
Others
debts.
avoid, others run to...
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so those are issues, but you have to be careful who you work with everywhere. The market, I think, is in recession, like most places in the region, or everywhere in the region, in fact. The recession has been going on since 2010 and hasn't hasn't come out of it. Croatia is also in recession. Hungary's in recession. Serbia has never not been in recession. And we won't talk about the rest of the former Yugoslavia because, Logging will fight me, but it's also, let's say, it's always been in recession. So it's not easy, and I think the toughest, the easy bit of it from a routing point of view for bigger bands is northern, what you call the North Balkans or the Central Europe part, so Budapest and Zagreb and Belgrade. But when you go south to the South Balkans, then you have a routing problem because there's you hit this strange territory called Bosnia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and a bit Macedonia, where not much happens because the markets are too small and there's no money and so forth and so on. And you go around the edge where you have Romania and Bulgaria, but the distances are quite big and they're also culturally rather different countries and with problems of their own, particularly in Bulgaria at the moment. And then you finally get to Istanbul and Greece. So touring-wise, it's a long. We're probably at least 5 years away from the whole Balkans being considered civilized from the point of view of bigger touring bands. But as far as the North Balkans are concerned, Slovenians I think don't really like to consider themselves Balkans. But
also Viennese, they don't like to be considered, because Balkan is kind of like rarely starting. So if you ask the Munich guys, probably they will say that the Balkan starts in Vienna.
Yeah.
But if you ask the Berlin guys, the Balkan will
okay, so the Balkans are always south of wherever you are. But those, it's like, for me, we like working in Slovenia. We like happy Slovenians, and Ljubljana is a beautiful place. And generally, organizationally, everybody knows what they're doing. Kino Šiška is a wonderful club, and there's a semi-club circuit in the region. It's not as strong as one would like it to be, but it exists. And the more clubs you can link together, and the same applies for a bigger level, then the better it is for everybody. It's better for the band, it's better for the promoters because they get better deals, they get more acts coming into the region, etc.
Yeah, okay. And now, as we are moving further south to the Balkans, we have Dragan here from Belgrade.
Further east.
Sorry?
Southeast. Belgrade is east of Ljubljana, not south.
Southeast. Also south is kind of like psychological.
Psychological south.
Anyway, Dragan, you are a music program manager, editor of the institution, which is kind of having the similar role as Šiška has in Ljubljana. So Omladine Belgrade, also city founded and funded cultural center in Belgrade. You are also involved a lot in booking also major acts to Exit and other events in Serbia and region. And you could tell us about your experience and so comparison the Serbian market and Slovenian, and also about the importance you see the connecting and collaborating among the promoters and organizers in the region, as we are collaborating on some events, on some projects with you. We are also collaborating with Tvornica Kulture in Zagreb, which is a similar capacity venue in Zagreb. So
you want me to give the audience a little bit of historical perspective for visiting Yugoslavia, and then some, right?
Definitely.
All right. So first I have to go back to my personal history, because my second name shows that there is some sort of a Slovenian origin in my family. This is true. There is my grandfather actually escaped from Slovenia 120 years because it was in such a poor country and under Austrian rule. So he went to Serbia, and that's
not a smart move.
Sometimes I think it was really smart. Sometimes I think he was fool. This just to say that I was kind of already sensitive to whatever was going on in Slovenia, because we had some sort of a family house anyway. this is really important to understand because in the former Yugoslavia these markets have been in touch, and there was a mix between Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia mainly. But for the majority of the history of Yugoslav pop music, Slovenia in the 50s, 60s and 70s has not been seen as a major market or major force on the level of popular music. Actually, the bands coming from Slovenia have been always considered as a good craftsmen, really good players in jazz rock, and all other boring stuff. And it was only in the late 70s when the music coming from Slovenia became not lame and not purpose. This is the way it was perceived, of course. When the band called Buležer came in the mid-70s, with the satirical messages which were never heard in our languages. But you have also to understand that Buležer were really extremely important band, not just from bringing those topics, but really singing in Serbo-Croatian language at that time. First bands actually to became overly popular in the whole of Yugoslavia came with the punky new wave. First Pankrti and then Mlačni Franc. Both bands made Slovenian language sort of a household. It's something that you will understand because there is a certain language gap. I mean, there is a language barrier between the rest of Yugoslavia at that time and Slovenia. It's a different language. Of course, Laibach made it internationally visible. So what it was considered like something like exception of the rule. First they got an international recognition and then all over Yugoslavia. But it shows how things have been changing. And the idea, just to show you a little bit of perspective, these bands have been the bands that brought the modern concepts of how to behave in popular music and how to structure it, how to send a message, and how to function. And this is what Slovenia was actually sort of bringing to the Yugoslav pop music scene. Another way of thinking, promotion of the bands, and especially promotion of foreign bands actually in former Yugoslavia. So the modern concepts and the modern structure of the business actually was introduced to the Yugoslav market through the efforts of the Slovenian promoters, especially the Vidman in the beginning, and then others. When I started to write about music sometimes in youth magazines called Student, sometime around 86, it was obvious that out of 7 independent record labels that we had, 5 were in Slovenia. And they were, the majority of the output of the independent record production was actually happening in Slovenia. Geographically speaking, they have been most on the west, so you had to, in many cases we traveled from Belgrade to see bands like from Diamant, Galas to Sonic Youth playing in Vienna. They couldn't really reach even Zagreb and so on and so on. So to get a modern rock, alternative rock experience and whatever was modern concept in the pop music, you were looking at Slovenia and what was going on over there. That's definitely true. But by the end of the 80s, things started to change, and modern ideas, modern concepts were slowly but surely being translated also to Zagreb and Belgrade first and so on. When the things started to break up, and we kind of lost touch with whatever was going on, and each republic has its own separate development in this respect, and it was only throughout late 90s that we started to get some sort of a contact. Personally, I was involved in 1995 with the first sort of exchange between Slovenian and Serbian music scene after the breakup of Yugoslavia. But things started to improve after 2000, and now it's really interesting to see how the things are going to develop, since as a country we're starting to negotiate to become a member of the European Union next year. January, Slovenia has been for a lot of years now a member of the European Union, but everybody's showing us like, look at these guys over there, they made it and so on. And they so don't follow our example and so on, because we are sort of having economic problems of all sorts and so on. But on a cultural level, I have to say that in the past 20 years, alternative culture have been networking all over the place. Personally, I was in contact with Slovenian promoters throughout those decades, with Zagreb also, and there was always some sort of networking on some level. Some level of change was always happening. And it's not a wonder that now Matjaž is in Kino Šiška, which is on the budget of City Hall of Ljubljana, and me in Omladine, which is the institution on the budget of City Hall of Belgrade. That we already did our share of making a really meaningful exchange of the bands and artists in both ways, like bands from Serbia traveling to Vienna, bands from Slovenia going to Belgrade. It's our aim to use the budgets, public budgets that we have, to enhance that sort of a culture exchange, whatever market or indifference of media is saying to us. What we have witnessed back home in Belgrade and in Ljubljana is that there is a curiosity to see what's happened over there, what's going on in Slovenia, and what's going on in Serbia. There is a Slovenian bands have the brand of their own in Serbia as being modern and cutting edge, as well as maybe Matjaž can say how do they perceive Serbian bands and Belgrade bands in
Well,
Slovenia.
as we were actually talking before on the panel with my colleagues, Serbian, actually we have kind of, nowadays we have kind of frustration not being able really to, for Slovenian bands, not really being able to tour much or to have effect in Serbian markets, while the Serbian bands in the last years, they got quite a lot of recognition, not just Serbian but also bands from other ex-Europe, Yugoslavian Republic. I mean, some of them, they're making them even, they get success and acknowledgement almost firstly in Slovenia and then also in the rest of ex-Yugoslavia, like Ambrožič is one of the recent examples. So Serbian bands, again, they are gaining younger, Serbian bands, like Ertl, they're gaining much attention and actually even more than most of Slovenian bands on this.
So we can safely say that there is a culture interest on both sides. It's shifting. This is something we can work on in the future. We can work with it and see how is it developing.
Definitely, and I think it's also the support from the institution that like ours is pretty much important to enable the bands to tour the markets.
Regarding foreign bands, I always try to coordinate around Balkans, around the region, and see if a promoter from Zagreb or a promoter from Ljubljana is willing to offer for a foreign band coming to the region and so on and so on. So this sort of mutual correspondence, mutual work still exists, and it was always existing as far as I'm concerned. So we are trying to put our efforts together as well as we were networking in Yugoslavia. And regarding alternative culture network, it never ceased to exist. Some sort of synergy was always there.
Yeah. Thank you, Dragan, for your insight from the east direction. And now we're moving to Tim. Now we're moving to different fields. You're coming from electronic music field, Springfestival, and as we were discussing before on mail before this panel, you were playing a lot as an artist also some time ago, and maybe you can also do some kind of historic comparison of how the electronic music scene in the 90s, where you were active as an artist in Slovenia, playing a lot, was functioning at that time, and how do you see it now? Well, probably you have a different viewpoint as a member of organization of Springfestival.
I mean, we just heard it before in one of the sessions before that there were always like quite big flights to Ljubljana. It's just 2 hours away now. 15 years ago, it could take you 6 hours. But yeah, it was very close, and there were a lot of bands like we heard today, like the Pixies, The Cure, Nick Cave, and then even later the Beastie Boys were playing in Ljubljana, and they weren't even coming to Vienna, they weren't playing in Graz at all. So yeah, people from Graz went down there to see those acts because they couldn't see it in anywhere near. So there were sort of connection, and then we heard for this K4, Kastire, the club when it evolved, and with Umeg, and we had early connections to those guys. Because we also had a record store at that time in Graz, and a lot of the Slovenian DJs came to us to buy records on a weekly basis. So we've been always informed what was going on, and you know, like you get to know each other, and then you invite them for a gig here in Graz, and they invite us back. So that's how we all established. They also had a very, very vivid rave scene around Maribor at that time, with Shokati, Dulem. So yeah, in a place called Pekarna. It was obviously later closed when the European standards came to Slovenia and for security measurements, and they couldn't have it open anymore. But it was a great place, and we had a lot of raves there. And in Graz, we didn't have a clubbing culture at all. So we were bored on the weekend, so nothing was better than to go to Maribor for a rave, or to Ljubljana, or somewhere even down to the coast. And yeah, through this record store, I think there were most of exchanges through the record store and re-invitations, and as the flyer was the most important media at that time to find out in the pre-internet phase where the next party is going on, we kept coming some flyers with a club named Ambasada Gavioli, and I had no idea what it was, and it sounded just very nice, and it was on the coast in Isola. So yeah, after a while, the guy came with the flyers. I was trying to set up a connection. I told him, like, can you just like hook me up with the guys there? Oh, it's very difficult. I don't know how to do it. And yeah, I went down to the copy shop. I put all my flyers I had up to this time, and made a nice little bigger folder. And on a cassette tape, I recorded a set of mine with labeling. Everything was pre-CD area even. Yeah, and I was sending it down, and then I didn't hear anything, and after a while I think I wrote one of my first emails to the club, because they already had a homepage with their email address. It was 99. And then finally I got in contact with them. He said, like, no, we had to change. It was Valentino Canziani at that time who made the booking, and he went out of the club. And later on it was a new guy, and I sent down my material, and yeah, finally he wrote back, you have your first booking there. So I was driving down to Isola. It was on the coast, and for a guy from me, like, highly addicted to sea, was kind of, it sounded crazy, a club on the coast, finally. And I don't know if you know the Ambasada Gavioli, but it wasn't mentioned today. I think it also had a fairly shared input to the Slovenian electronic music scene. Surely more on the techno and more commercial house level, but on the international standard, I think it was the club with the most international renowned DJs coming and playing in Ambasada for a pretty wide crowd. It was, as it is located in Isola, a lot of Italians from Trieste in the region were coming, a lot from Croatians, even from Zagreb up, the whole of Istria and Slovenia were coming there together, so we had a very nice, great mixed crowd there, and it was great to play. For me, when I entered the first time this club, it was built by Mr. Gavioli. It's a very renowned architect for clubs, and there was recently now a documentation coming out about this club where he said, like, it was one of his very few projects where he had total freedom, creative freedom to do what he wanted. So if you go there inside, it looks like a bit of Gaudi, crazy architecture. It's all the kind of tiles mixed up, a lot of colors, and yeah, when I entered there the first time, I was thinking, that's it. That's the first time a real club I'm in, and sound system great, atmosphere great, and it was the most important club at that time in Slovenia, so it opened a lot of doors to me, to the Slovenian markets, to the Croatian market. I was even booked down until Osijek, which is fairly far away from Isola, and it was a great starting point, and I think a lot for the Slovenian scene was done in Ambasada Gavioli, and it was the first time some international focus on the electronic music scene was put on Slovenia. And then later on we had the Vrkana Beach Festival in Croatia, and I think from that momentum on, the whole festival scene, and Croatia as a festival, and Slovenia as a festival scene for electronic music came from that moment on.
Okay. And okay, about migrations of audiences from one country and another, you were saying the audiences from Croatia, from Austria, from Italy were coming to Ambasada. Now you are doing the Spring Festival, and Spring Festival has been quite popular also with Slovenian audiences. So I'm interested in your experience as being a PR of the festival. What are your experiences in promotion? How you approach promoting your festival to Slovenian media audiences? What is the response of the media and the audience, and yeah, how important is this for you, for your festival?
As I was around and playing in quite a lot of clubs, I had good connections to other crews and DJs, and yeah, I think in 2004 we started with the promotion in the Slovenian market. I just asked around my guys, like, do you wanna help me with the promotion in Slovenia for the Spring Festival, and vice versa, you come to Graz to play at the Spring Festival. It always worked. I was always trying to, as crews are changing, over the years you change the crews, and there are different organizations. We worked with K4 3 years, but as it's a student organization, they change every second year, so you lose your contact somehow. But I was trying always to focus on crews and DJs and clubs and club nights to get into the crowd. I was from the house crowds to with the Radio Yo-Yo guys, I cooperated 1 year, to the drum and bass crowds, to so funk crews, and I was trying to establish a broad field for the Spring Festival, to go into a lot of different music genres, to get the name there. And in the last years we were working mostly with media, like Radio Student, for example, Radio Marš in Maribor, as I see them as a more broader and maybe also like a stronger partner to you reach more people. So when we established a name, and I saw like now Spring Festival is a name in Slovenia, I could go to the media and push it even more. And it's very well received. I mean, Omladine ran a great article last year in 2 pages, one up front, one later. It all depends on the acts, and as we have acts which are not playing that often or not really playing in Slovenia, as we had it with Amon Toben and the Isam project, which was something we got a lot of response from Ljubljana, because the closest it came to the region was Berlin. So
it's really exclusive thing.
It was very exclusive. It was very great this year with Chili Gonzalez. So we got people from Budapest because he's not coming there. So it really all depends on the act, which is when it's really exclusive, you get a good response. And Isam is really something you can write about. And it was a nice article in Radina. So yeah, it all depends on the acts, and we're trying to focus on the more left-wingish acts, but still famous. It's hard to find them, but if you have this quite famous act that does something different, the media response also in Austria and everywhere is great. Because finally they have to write something about it. It's not a 4/4 bar and hands up in the air, so which you have also in the whole EDM debate now.
What would you say is the trend of attendance of Slovenian audience to your festival? Do you see any like rising of numbers, or?
Yes, we get more and more. We see it also on Google Analytics and what we hear and what we see, and the attraction it's rising more and more. And yeah, I think it has to do what we talked today. Go east, go west. I don't know. It's like you have in Croatia a lot of summer festivals, but they're not really on the finer art of electronic music. And in Slovenia, it's not really something going on that level at the moment. So we have great response, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah. Okay, and this brings us actually to the topic which I would like to discuss with all of you, and the topic is really important and kind of like the weakest point I think from Slovenian scene. It's a lack of a decent festival. So the fact is that Slovenia doesn't have really a quality music festival on the range, on the level of, for example, Exit Festival, Teroneo, E-Music, the Serbian Croatian Festival, or on the other hand, is now being more and more kind of squeezed in the corner of UK produced festivals in Croatia, in Easter, actually just 1 hour and a half or 2 hours from Ljubljana. And just in September there are 3 very big and high quality festivals that are produced, booked by UK organizers, Dimension Festivals, Outlook Festivals, and now new Unknown Festival in Robin. And
these are all most electronica.
Electronica, indie, so you have acts like Django playing, Moderat, not just DJs. And my experience is also pretty frustrating, because we have all this like really hot acts in the region, but they come exclusivity deals, so we cannot, like, even though they are just like an hour or 2 hours drive away from Ljubljana, I had a trouble to get them to connect the gig in Ljubljana.
From my point of view, I would say, because we work a lot with festivals and we have a history with Exit and with In-Music and Torneo and with Sigic, in fact, I'd say festivals are a weird thing. You know, they can follow an obvious logic like Sigic's in the middle of Budapest, or they can follow a not very obvious logic like Exit, which is in Novi Sad, which before Exit was a city that most of the world had never heard of. And Šibenik is a city which most of the world has never heard of, which is where Torneo is. So a festival can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a big place. And obviously Slovenia is central enough, and there's a big hinterland around Slovenia, so that if you had a festival that would attract people from Austria, from Hungary, from the former Yugoslavia, from Italy, etc., then in theory you could have a viable event. It wouldn't have to depend on Slovenians. The reality of making that festival depends on a lot of other things, because the fact that the festivals that there are, Torneo is not a financially viable festival at the moment. Exit, I think, is a kind of miracle that happened in a very unique festival, which would be impossible to replicate anywhere else. It's just Exit. Sigic is in the middle of Budapest. Hungary has at the moment a lot of problems because it actually doesn't attract Hungarians; it only attracts foreigners. So the sponsors go, why do we give money to a festival which, where we can't sell our products, market our products to the audience? In-Music is basically a city event in Zagreb. So you have a different logic for each festival, and somebody has to take the initiative. The government is not going to take the initiative. A mayor might take an initiative conceivably, but there's only Maribor or Ljubljana then, who are big enough probably. And it's unlikely at the moment in the recession and so on. So it's a private person who would take the promoter, who would take the initiative and say, I'm going to do a festival in Slovenia, and have to find the location, have to find a supportive city council to work with, and so forth and so on. Would have very limited sponsorship possibilities because Slovenia is too small a market, and therefore would rely on selling tickets outside of Slovenia in quite significant number, unless it's a very niche festival
like it is, for example. I mean, the biggest festival we have, it's a heavy metal festival, metal days, which is attracting. I mean, I think they sold only 10 to 20% of the tickets to the local audience. So
sure.
Everything else is Austrian, German, Scandinavian.
And there's no other metal festival in the region, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's
Punk Rock Holiday.
And Punk Rock Holiday.
That's doing well as well, isn't it?
But I think it's doing okay. They're still I think they're close to covering the cost, but not.
The Austrians are traveling there as well.
Yeah.
I'd be interested how many
This is now the
percentages.
third year it has been, and it's.
So if you got it with I think the idea of a niche festival, and it doesn't matter whether it's electronic or punk rock, is that people will travel, because there's not going to be a competing similar festival anywhere else, at least in the region, so that people then will have a motive to go, to travel 500 kilometers.
This is the thing. I mean, we have niche festivals like punk rock, heavy metal. We had reggae, a strong reggae festival until five years ago. Actually, all three of them on the same location. Tommy, really beautiful, two rivers coming together. So yeah, outside of the city, natural location. But yeah, I mean, to establish, to set up a festival of this kind of profile, some indie, electronic, alternative rock, while being our small market being surrounded by established and strong festival, and actually they're piling up every year more. I mean, especially in Istria, and kind of like bailing us out with exclusivity deal with the artists that they're booked there. So this is making a problem to establish. There's also no promoter in Slovenia. I mean, there isn't, as far as I know, there's no successful commercial promoter in the way that there is in Hungary, or even to some extent in Croatia, because the market's too small.
So people, people who are promoting are doing other things, or they have, like you have, you're a city venue. You're not a commercial promoter. So that's a factor too. It might be that it would be an outside promoter who an Austrian promoter, for example, who would decide that I'm going to do a festival in Slovenia and sell it to Austrians.
Anybody interested?
I want to be involved. So,
No.
but it's, I actually, I'm in the middle of trying to establish a festival in Turkey, and a lot of it comes down to the city council or the regional council. If you have an enlightened mayor who goes, for example, it would be Maribor, more likely than Ljubljana. The mayor of Maribor would go, I want Maribor, Maribor is just this city of culture, and you just go, I want Maribor to be seen as a really cool place to be, an exciting, not the second city to Ljubljana, but an important city in its own right. Then of course you set up a festival. That would be a very logical thing to do, but of course in a recession that's very difficult. And
it's less logical in a recession.
It's less logical in a recession, plus the mayor might be fairly conservative and boring and not understand any of this thing and miss it completely and just be thinking about opera or something.
Dragan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, first to establish the festival, you have to find what's the reason to launch a festival. And with the rise of the boutique and intimate festivals, I can't really see any reason why not having a special design festival on some beautiful location in Slovenia. What you have to have is a really good business plan behind it and artistic reason to do this, because after all, festival is an artistic event and people will pay a lot of money just to travel and to see it on a beautiful location with the artists they have never seen or cannot see it in this region. So that might be a good idea how to have like an independent, separate festival just in Slovenia, which is not taking in consideration any regional other festivals that are done around the country, any competition. So far as we have seen in Exit and Urania festivals that I've been involved with, is trains of people from Slovenia coming to Exit Festival. Obviously people from Slovenia like festivals, but they also like to travel outside of Slovenia. Not to mention that in the last 8 years since I started to work in Omladine, every new year we have a Slovenian students organization renting the culture center in the very center of Belgrade just to have their own New Year's party in Belgrade. So this means that for some reason Slovenians like to travel outside, see whatever is going on around the country and so on and so on. Maybe there is also a lack in the potential, lack of the belief in your own potential that you can do it. This can be changed by a lot of you from your side, for example, and a good plan and so on and so on. So it's up to Slovenian promoter actually to discover what's the reason to do that. Festival in Šibenik, but there are now didn't happen. There was no reason for this at the beginning. There was just a good site and the promoter with a lot of vision, and he made it. Also, Novi Sad, it didn't look good at the beginning, but they had a beautiful fortress and a student organization with a lot of vision. So at the beginning, there has to be somebody with a vision and a good calculation. If we can come up with this, then you will have a festival.
One thing I'd say about festivals is that it certainly applies to Exit. It doesn't apply to, and it applies actually to Sigic as well, is that one of the best models for a festival is start small. Start very small. Start so small that you can't lose too much money. And create have a good name, have a good location, create the vibe. And if there's only 1,000 people or 2,000 people, that's fine, as long as you budget accordingly. Of course, if you don't, you're in trouble. But if Exit started small, Exit in the first year was a complete mess. And Sigic was just like a sort of student hippie thing with local bands in the first couple of years. So you can start very small with a good idea and enthusiasm, and even quite amateur level. Then you have to learn, and you have to become more professional, and then you can grow steadily. And that's really, I think, the best model for a festival, unless you have some rich Austrian or German or British promoter coming in and just spending loads of money, which you might have to wait a long time for.
No, I don't see where. I don't see which field of music. I mean, if you talk about the electronic music, it can be only done by Umek and some people of him, and he does it once a year in Park Tivoli. sort of a free event, and we had the Meet Me Festival in Divača a couple of years ago, and quite a long time ago, and it all went off. So I don't know who could do it, who has the power, who has the belief and the vision, and Matjaž, you have to do it.
Let's close this session so I can go to work.
But it's difficult, and Istra is very close. Istra was very prospering in the last years, and I don't know where. I think it should go back to the where Ambasada Gavioli, the first thing of Ambasada Gavioli came here, this circus and presentation, and going a bit more far away from the music and the main act and the main star, like going more into something celebrating and more circus, more artistic view. And I've been to festival just now, and they do a lot of this in these fields, and it's a music festival, but they have a lot of side program, and I think it should be something new.
If you're going to do something with electronica, given that there's so much commercial electronica around in the region, you'd have to do something underground. You'd have to find something that was really different in musical identity than anything that's happening in Istria.
So because all this field is covered, and
Yeah,
all the
saturated.
regions that we cannot beat, like in the seaside, and it's
It's saturated.
It's saturated completely. Okay. We are getting close to the end of this panel, so I'd like to ask if anybody has some questions for the audience or some comments, something to add on this point. Otherwise, I would, if you have something to add, maybe.
For me, the only question I had was, I think maybe it's worth for people who are interested, because the panel's about, I think, entering the Slovenian market in particular. So it'd be very interesting just to very quickly scan through. You know, in Ljubljana you have Ertl, which is the underground, punky, very street squat club vibe.
Conglomerate of clubs, yes.
Yeah, and then you have Kino Šiška, which is city-funded, very nice facility, which is a little bit bigger and more official, let's say. And then you have, and for bigger concerts, you have Hala Tivoli, which is a big sports hall, which has got nothing to say about it except that it's big. And
a lot of natural echo.
A lot of natural reverb, so you don't need to have too much reverb, and you save some money on the system. And you have Križanke, which I mentioned, which is a beautiful summer stage in the
And there's a
center.
new arena, I started saying, which is...
New arena, like God help you. When is it opening? It's open.
It's open.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
4 or 5 years.
Well, then it's so new that. Anyway, so does it work commercially? I mean, is there?
Well, for really
Leonard
commercial
Cohen was
artists-
the last concert there.
Leonard Cohen, yeah, but
Right.
we have a-
But it's the sound is even worse than Tivoli.
Wow, that's an achievement.
Yeah.
So yeah, the designers didn't really think about the acoustics. when
Right,
they
that's smart.
put it together.
And what about Maribor?
Maribor has a venue.
I saw the repetitor in Maribor in December or whenever it was, in January, and it was in a signal box. It's a disused signal box. It was minus 10 degrees outside and minus 9 degrees inside. It was a fascinating cultural experience.
So good that we still have you here. That's amusing. So you're interested. What's the possibility to book?
But just to know what the market is in Maribor. I mean, what are the facilities? What happens as far as international?
There's not many international shows.
For example, we only did shows in Vienna so far.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's a problem with audience there. They're having a summer kind of city festival, which is like a 2 weeks festival length, which is mostly it's an entrance, free entrance event. It's kind of like fair, kind of city fair, mixed music events, but it's more jazz, pop, world music. Mostly artists playing there, quite a lot of quality ones. Amazing way play there. Fabi Kuti and artists like this. Medeski, Martin and Wood, just this year. But apart from this, they're getting some underground bands in the squats, autonomous place similar to Metelko, the Karna. But I think they have quite a problem with the audience there. So we also did kind of some collaboration with Maribor, some more experimental electronic artists, and there was almost no audience. I mean, if it comes from Ljubljana. So it's quite hard to get the band booked in Maribor, I think, and get a decent fee for it. Apart from that, there are some clubs in other smaller towns in Slovenia, but to the capabilities of paying fees bigger than 500 euros, it's almost non-existing. So they're getting some bands, but as I'm saying, until 500 euros fee.
But Maribor has the facilities. There is just no promoter who would do concerts there. Like last year when it was capital of culture, they did Laurie Anderson in one hall, and it was sold out. It was 1,500 people. So there are
but it's a kind of
there.
unique context with the culture capital of Europe.
Yeah, but it's strange. They have decent halls to do that, and Austria is quite near. There would be a good possibility to do shows there. Yes.
There's just no promoter.
There is no promoter there to.
It's I think another case where the city itself would have to kind of take the initiative to do co-promotions with to set something up where you fertilize or catalyze the scene. But then the city has to go, we have this facility, we're a city, we should have culture, and they have to think like that. If they don't think like that, then it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, but they've been cultural capital year of Europe, and then they had the wrong mayor exactly in that time.
Yeah, that was a joke.
The mayor anymore, complete jerk. And yeah, that was a really bad coincidence that you get that jerk as a mayor, and you are the city of culture. And that was Graz was also cultural capital in 2003, and it was a turbo boost for the city.
Graz was a brilliant example how the
we as a festival we grew tremendously exactly in that year, and from that year on we have a wider reputation, and it was so much money invested in the town.
And they were taking in longer terms, and the effects they bring.
We live from that. We live from those locations built in that time.
Well, after Maribor project of cultural capital, nothing is really.
I mean, I went down one time, and it's 45 minutes from Graz, not even, because you didn't hear anything. It was Festival Land is famous for quite some time, but you didn't hear Laurie Anderson. Yes, we went down for Laurie Anderson, but the rest was gone down. And
Jimmy Tanner was playing there for the first week of the opening of the cultural capital year. Nobody knew, even from Ljubljana, almost nobody. So,
but they did Sigur, for example.
yeah,
That was their big gig.
Yeah.
but it was organized by Ljubljana-based.
Well, yeah, but they used the.
The one other venue we didn't mention in Ljubljana is Čankar Dom,
Yes.
which is the kind of classical jazz world music.
It's like kind of elite cultural institution, and they have a really quality avant-garde jazz series of events in a small club they have, and they are. I mean, it's a seated venue. It's like they have you cannot, you can promote a certain kind of artists which that are requesting kind of seated situation. But yes, I mean, they're not bringing acts like, in the alternative rock pop sphere. It's jazz, world music. It's this genre oriented.
But before it was.
Okay, we have to end because we have some Slovenian quality wine, cheese, and especially music waiting for us upstairs. So thanks to all the panelists for sharing their experiences and opinions about the Slovenian music market. Thank you, audience, and you're all kindly invited upstairs on the rooftop and to taste wine, cheese, and especially the performance of a great electro hip-hop artist, Entoko, which will be
And
also
I can say that Entoko, just to advertise Entoko, I asked my office and everybody I knew who knew the Slovenian music scene and my Slovenian friends, and they all said Entoko was the act you had to see.
Exactly. So thank you and let's go on.